Today is my alive day. 10 years ago, on November 18th, 2015, on Montague Island in Alaska's Prince William Sound, I was mistaken for a deer while deer hunting and shot with a 30-06. I was hit in the left shoulder. I'm going to tell you the story of how all that happened, and bear with me. I have a tendency to ramble. I'll try and keep the story brief and on point. Me and my best friend contracted with a transporter who would pick people up in Whittier, Alaska, and he'd run about 6 hours across Prince William Sound east to Montague Island and stay on a converted fishing trawler that had been turned into a floating motel. And then you would be run to shore in the morning in a skiff and then picked up in the evening. This was the fourth day of a 4-day hunt. And my buddy and I had shot one deer between us. The limit in Alaska at the time was 4 deer. These are Sitka blacktails. And we had taken one between us. And the plan was to take 5 deer between us and then share the meat. So we'd spent entirely too much time walking and talking together and not giving the deer their due. Sitka blacktails are not terribly difficult to find and hunt, but the area that we were in was had been heavily hunted by this transporter's clients. He was bringing out 6 people a week throughout the fall. We were the last group of the year. It was mid-November. The rut was just past its peak, but the deer were still active. The thing is that over 100 deer had been taken out of this area, mostly bucks. So we saw a few deer here and there. We took one. This is the 4th day. And we had agreed the night before that we were going to split up early and go our separate ways and then meet back midday and see how we did. We weren't going to hang out together and BS and disturb deer. So we got dropped off in a slightly different spot. This was a place called Stapleton Harbor. And we headed east towards up a drainage, and then we turned into an area of open parks. And it was cold. November was about 25 degrees. It was a bright, clear day. The snow was thin, but hard and crunchy. So it was impossible to walk and be quiet. And we entered this big meadow, this big park, and we agreed to split up. And my friend continued north towards the base of this big flat-topped hill, and I swung out to the west. And I went about 500-600 yards, and I gained the ridge line, and I was in a saddle, and I was looking down the backside of the valley. And after a while, I turned east, and I followed the ridge right up to the west side of the same hill my buddy was going up. He was working his way into he had already disappeared into the brush on the south face, and I went up the west face. And I got on top. I circled around to the north, and there was deer sign and trails, and I was very encouraged. And the canopy this is mature hemlock forest, and some Doug fir, and not a lot of snow had fallen, and very little had actually made it to the ground. Everything was covered in this kind of bright green sphagnum moss, which was frozen. And I walked the rim trail around to the north to about the center of this hilltop, which was about 400 yards long and about 150 yards wide. And I got around about to the midway point, and I turned south, and I worked my way across the top of the hill, picking my way, listening for deer, looking for deer. I was actively still hunting. And then I got to the south rim, and the sun had just come up. Now, that far north, the sun rises late, particularly in the fall. So it was about 10:45 in the morning. The sun had been up for a few minutes. I think official sunrise that day was about 10:25 in the morning. It was about 10:45. So the sun is low on the horizon, and the woods are bathed in golden light. It's actually quite beautiful. And everything is either that kind of olive green from the frozen sphagnum, or everything is in harsh shadow from all the trees, or it's bathed in golden light. There was very little blues and reds and other colors. And Alaska is not a mandatory hunter orange state, and I wasn't wearing any. So I had stepped down off the rim onto a little bench. This is a pretty steep hillside, and there was a little bit of a bench below me, and I stood there. So I heard noise off to my right, and something was moving up the hill. And then I caught a glimpse of the curve of a deer's butt just jutting out from behind a big hemlock tree. And then I brought my binoculars up, and I confirmed it was definitely a deer. And I looked on the uphill side of the tree, trying to catch a glimpse of if I could see the head, if it was a buck or what it was. And whatever, I never did see antler or see any part of the deer's front part of his body. This was a big tree, by the way. And the deer turned and went directly away from me and just kept the tree between me and it walked to the west. And then a minute or two later, I heard more noise, and this was well below me, downhill. And I looked, and I see my friend. I see his face, but I don't see his whole body because he's standing partially obscured by the shadows of the group of trees that he's standing in. But I can see his face, and I can see his hands moving. And I waved to him because at this point it's about 11:30 in the morning, and my intention is that I'm going to walk. My mental process here is I'll get his attention, and I'll walk down there, and we'll talk, and we'll make a plan. But this hill looks like it's got deer on it. We should hunt this for the rest of the day. I had my left hand out in front of me. I had been waving to him. I had a hat on, and I took my hat off, and I waved my hat. And then I waved my hands. I was wearing leather gloves, plain those yellowy tan leather gloves. And I was looking at his face, and his face disappeared for a second. And then I saw a puff of gray smoke. And then I saw a metallic glint, and then it disappeared. And then I saw the glint again. And I had my left hand out in front of me, like this. I had my left hand out in front of me. And the bullet passed right over the tip of my extended thumb because I felt my thumb buzz. And then it felt like somebody hit me in the shoulder with a sledgehammer. It was a 180 grain pointed soft point hunting bullet from a 30-06 at about 70 yards. And it hit me with about 2,000 pounds of foot energy, 2,000 foot-pounds of energy. It immediately began to mushroom. I didn't feel any of this. And all of this that I'm describing to you happened in about a 1/12 of a second. But I was looking right down the barrel of the rifle when my friend pulled the trigger. He didn't know I was in front of him. He thought I was behind him. And he was convinced everything I did to get his attention reinforced the illusion that I was a deer. And he looked at me through a rifle scope for 30 seconds before pulling the trigger. He actually turned his rifle scope down from 6 power down to 3 power to get a wider field of view. At no point did he see a human being. Everything I did to get his attention reinforced, the idea that he was looking at a deer, and he carefully squeezed off the shot. And when the bullet hit me, I shrieked, "You shot me!" And his immediate response back was, "No, I didn't. I shot a deer." And this is an important element to this because when he was a kid, his dad would play that, almost like that old Fred Sanford game when he would grab his chest and go, "Elizabeth, I'm coming to you, I'm coming to you." Well, if a car backfired or somebody slammed a door, or something dropped something heavy and there was a smack or a boom noise, my friend's dad would go, "Oh, you shot me. Oh, you shot me." Playing that game with his children. And when I yelled out, "You shot me," his response was, "No, I didn't. I shot a deer." And I screamed back, "No." And this time, at this moment, I was genuinely afraid that he was going to shoot again. And I screamed out, "No, you shot me. Stop shooting." And the thing is, the bullet didn't knock me down. It blew right through me. and I took a couple of steps forward, and I kind of lost my balance, and I fell back against, again, we're talking about a steep decline, and I fell back against the hill. And this time I was I was exposed in a shaft of daylight. What I didn't understand was I was half in the shadow, half in the light when he pulled the trigger. And now I'm fully in the daylight, and he sees me, and he freaks out. And he comes bounding up the hill after me. Now, this is a big man, and he hasn't bounded anywhere in a long time. Big, broad-shouldered, stout bear of a man, but admittedly overweight and not in the best shape. And he came bounding up that hill like a gazelle. And he got about halfway to me, and he realized he forgot his backpack, which had all his medical supplies. And he used to be a paramedic in a past life, an EMT anyway. And he turned and went back and got the stuff. And then he got to me. And in the moment he turns his back and he starts down the hill is when I wonder, is this what dying feels like? Because I was amazingly calm. I was in a state of peace. I didn't feel a tremendous amount of pain. And I didn't feel weak or wobbly. I felt so alive. I could hear things that I could hear, like I could hear and see and smell everything. Everything was a little crisper, a little bit brighter. I don't know if it was the adrenaline or what, but everything, all my senses were turned on, super, super sensitive. And I reached back and I felt the hole in my clothes and I saw the blood, and I wondered if I was experiencing arterial bleeding and I was about to pass out. And I look behind me, and I'm trying to see, there's brush and stuff behind me, and I'm trying to see, am I spraying the hillside behind me with blood? And it's not there. I can see a few specks of blood because the bullet blew out half of my posterior deltoid muscle. It kind of vaporized it. And there was little bits of me sprayed on the bushes behind me, but not a lot of blood. And I actually got my phone out of my pocket, and I was about to make a goodbye video, thinking I was gonna die. I wanted to say goodbye to my wife and my family. And he got to me and shocked me out of my little my thing. And he's got tears in his eyes, and he's apologizing, and he's crying. And this, I guess, was my moment of clarity. And he said, if you want to hate me for the rest of your life, I'll totally understand. And I said, well, we'll worry about that later. Right now, I want to know, am I dying? And he said, oh yeah. And this is the truth. He looked at me and he says, okay, I'm going to go into EMT mode right now. And I said, yeah, that would be great. It just speaks to the innate ability of men to compartmentalize. He was shocked out of his emotional state for a second, and he went to work, tapping into his previous experience. And he got behind me and he looked and he said, well, kind of like a mechanic looking over a car that isn't running right. He goes, well, he says, there's a big hole there. You lost a lot of meat, but it's not that bad. You're not really bleeding. And I thought, well, okay, good. And then he dug out his pack and he carried some surplus gunshot wound bandages, compression bandages that were treated with, clotting agent. And he got me all bundled up. And then the thing is, had my rifle on my left shoulder, and the bullet went through the wood stock of I have a Winchester Model 70 Classic in 30-06, stainless barrel in action. And the bullet went through the stock and it hit the barrel and left a dent in it. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that the rifle got hit, but of course there's blood and goo all over the rifle. So I asked him to I asked him to carry my little day pack and my rifle for me. And we were about a mile from the beach where we got dropped off, and we had left a waterproof duffel tucked into a big driftwood log that had washed up onto the shore. And the root wad and all was on this, basically a tree. And we tucked it up under the log, and we had food and a little backpacking stove and a pot to make water. And on the off chance we would have to spend the night, we had the bare minimum supplies to make a fire and ride out, one night of bad weather. There was a UHF handheld walkie-talkie that the transporter had given us in case we ever needed to call the boat early. Let's say we got our limited deer and we dragged him down to the beach and we were done, so they would come get us. So I took off, and it was a very prayerful walk. I had a very long and heartfelt, I don't know how long it was, but I had a very heartfelt conversation with God. You might not believe in God, but I do. And I believe that I'm alive for a reason of his knowing and his making, that he kept me on this earth for a purpose. I don't know that I exactly know what that purpose is yet, but I give thanks every day that I still have the ability to interact with the people that I love. I made it to the beach. I had turned my shirt into an impromptu sling by doing what I'm doing right here. I just unbuttoned a button and I tucked my hand inside and to keep my shoulder immobile. And it was kind of icy. I had a couple of close calls. I slipped once, but I made sure to lean over on my right side, and I got back up and I got down to the beach. I don't know, it took about 10, 12 minutes to go the mile or so. It was mostly a downhill walk, and partly it was in thick woods and part was in wide open country. But anyway, I get to the beach and I find the duffel, and I have to do everything with one hand, which is a little bit difficult. And I dig it open, I get the radio out, and I have a moment of panic because I can't turn the thing on. I see the power button, the little circle with the little eye in it, and I'm hitting it and hitting it and hitting it, and then it dawns on me, okay, hold the button down. Try holding it down for 3 seconds, and I did that. Boom, it powered up. And I made a transmission on channel 16, which anyone who's got any boating experience, that 16 is the general frequency for boaters. It's kind of like channel 19 for CB radios on the highway. So I hailed the boat, and I told them that I had a real-world medical emergency, that I had sustained a gunshot wound, and I was ambulatory. But I was going to need transportation to the hospital, and can they come please pick me up right now? So by the time they got the boat to the beach, my partner had joined me, and we loaded up, and we actually picked up another member of our party who had radioed in and wanted to go back in. And we got to the boat, and then we had a kind of a clunky conversation over the radio with the Coast Guard to try to get them to launch a helicopter. Whether it was a Air National Guard helicopter. We were so far out that the medevac flights, the life flight, lifeguard, the civilian helicopter life flight type providers, they didn't have enough range to get to us and get me back to Anchorage, to the hospital. So it was going to have to be the Air National Guard, the 210th Rescue Squadron out of Anchorage, but they were on a real-world rescue somewhere in the foothills of Denali, so they were not available. That left the Coast Guard Air Station on Kodiak Island, which was 200 miles away. And after a little arm wrestling, the Coast Guard launched their bird, and they picked me up on a little bald spot of rock a few hundred yards away from where the Kathy G was anchored, and then they flew me to Anchorage. And the man who shot me and I are still, to this day, best friends, because this man made a mistake. but he's still one of the best people I've ever known in my life. And I want to say that I was as responsible for me getting shot as he was, because we separated and I circled around and got into his cordon of fire. He didn't know I was going to be there. He didn't know what my plans were because we didn't talk, and I was kind of playing it by ear and making it up as I went along. I never in my wildest dreams would imagine that he would confuse me for a deer, but there I was. I was wearing an olive drab military surplus wool shirt, and I was wearing cattail camouflage waterproof pants, or my duck hunting pants. And so I'm wearing subdued, natural earth tones, and I'm half in the shadow and half in the sunlight. And I'm waving my hands, and he sees antlers, and I took my hat off and I waved it in front of my face. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with deer in the black-tailed mule deer family, but they have white butts and they have white tails with a black tip. And so what he thought he was seeing with my big fat oval head is that thought he was looking at a deer's butt, and that the dark flash of my hat in front of my face was the tail swishing back and forth. And then when I waved my hands, he saw antlers raking the brush. And if you're going to hunt in the dark woods, whether it's required in your state or your province or not, wear hunter orange and have a plan every day that you're hunting with other people, and stick to the plan. Unless you have a means of communicating, and you can let them know that you're going to change your plan. And that's not just about getting shot. What if you get hurt? What if you get lost? What if you lose your balance? You slide down a steep hill, down into a deep, dark ravine, and no one knows you're there. Any number of things that can happen when you're by yourself in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, today, November 18th, 2025, is the 10-year anniversary of my Alive Day, and I am very grateful to still be alive and on this planet.